Today I'm going to be talking about compression. So, what is compression? The whole point of compression is control. So, compression works by squeezing or compressing the dynamic range of a sound. And by squeezing this range and then bringing the signal back up again, in effect, you're pushing down the peaks and pulling up the valleys of any given sound. So, think of dynamic range as the distance between the smallest intensity of sound and the largest. It's not actually linear, so it's measured in decibels, and decibels are on what's called a logarithmic function. So it's not linear. The closer you get to the 1 decibel range, the distance between 1 and 2 is going to be different than at the higher end of the spectrum. So the goal is to not get too overcompressed, yet not too undercompressed either. If you have a song with a quiet section, you generally want to keep that section more quiet and not just as loud as the full band section or a heavy bass section, because that just would sound typically unnatural or unmusical. So you take a look at each instrument individually. And you want to listen primarily referencing the mix itself, because if you only listen to each individual instrument, they're going to actually sound different on their own than they do meshed with all those other instruments. So you'll want to reference your mix constantly. And you'll want to identify which instruments do you want to do what to with that compression, such as loudening. Do you want to maybe balance the levels so that they sit better with other instruments? Do you want to contain peaks if there are certain peaks that don't sound good or sit well with other instruments? So here's a great visual example of some of those applications and how the levels can be adjusted after compression and then after applying makeup gain. So in compression, we bring down the level, which we usually measure in a threshold or even an input gain, and then we usually bring that level back up. Sometimes, as in this example today, you'll see Ableton has an auto makeup gain, which is a useful function, and then you control the level with the output. And typically, the compressor is going to increase the average volume of the sound, but generally, we never want to increase the peaks of that sound or add too much of that compressor's noise. So there is such a thing as over-compressing something. And taking a look here at this page, this is a great page out of Ro Iyazaki's Mixing Audio Second Edition, which is a highly detailed book on the subject of mixing. I'd highly recommend it. So let's start setting up some of these initial settings in our compressor. So we'll want to leave the threshold all the way up. We'll want to bring the ratio all the way up so that we can hear it at its loudest, most aggressive ratio from the beginning, and then reduce from there. We'll want to bring the attack and release all the way to their fastest point and then go up from there as far as making them longer. And we'll want to set up our peak and RMS functions beforehand. So peak will analyze based on the peaks of that sound, and the RMS will analyze based on the averages. So we'll want to use RMS most often in applications such as vocals. So now I'll get started, and as you can see here, I'm opening up this Ableton Live Mixdown. So I put this together for today. It's rough, so keep that in mind. Go easy on me. I'm dropping in the standard Ableton Live compressor. As you can see here, there's a few view modes in that compressor on the bottom left-hand side, and I'm going to change that look-ahead function so we have a slightly more accurate analysis. As you can see over those knobs on the left, I brought the ratio all the way up and turned the attack and release to their fastest, and now I'll turn the threshold down below that sound so that it's actually underneath those waveforms, and I'll start to bring the ratio back down so as to dial it in. So when it's up at the top, when it's a loud ratio, you can see it gets very dense and compressed. It acts more like a limiter, what they call a limiter. But as we bring it down, it compresses the sound without squeezing it to death. And we'll start to bring the attack up slightly. We can just turn on the auto release. So down in the bottom left-hand side, that yellow button is auto release, which has a great reputation. So feel free to use it. We'll bring up the output level, and as you can see in the upper right-hand side, that makeup button is turned on. That yellow makeup gain button is auto makeup gain. So the output acts as just the loudness of the signal. The auto makeup gain actually already applies the makeup gain for that amount of threshold. So as you can see, it sounds a lot more balanced. You can see the gain reduction there, that yellow bar up towards the top that looks like a bunch of sawtooth waves, kind of. And I'll take a look at this higher instrument, this pad instrument. We'll bring the output down a little bit so I don't blow your speakers up. And we'll start to drop that threshold down after we set up the ratio and attack and release. So it's very dense. We start to bring the ratio down to make it less dense, more palatable. And you can see that yellow bar right there heading down. That's the gain reduction taking place. So you can see the gain reduction. And that's also that yellow wispy bar right there, that gain reduction. And the yellow, or the orange bar right there is the threshold. We'll bring the threshold up a little bit, and then we'll start to bring the attack up. Release, we can either bring it up because this is a longer instrument, or we can turn on auto release, which works great. We can turn on RMS with this particular instrument because it's a longer, more echoed out, spatial instrument. So we can turn on either peak or RMS. Either one works in this case. We'll just turn it on peak for now. As you can see, it beefs it up a little bit, that compressor, but we don't want to make it too loud either. So we'll want to keep it somewhat similar before and after we apply that compression. Now, this is sounding a lot more balanced. It's sounding a lot better. So we're going to take this third instrument and we're going to drop a compressor on there too. We'll drop the output, lower the attack and release a little bit, all the way down. And we'll start to bring that threshold down below those waveforms to clean it up and balance it out a little bit. So we'll bring that to minus 30.4, and then we'll start to drop that ratio so it's a little bit less dense. And you can turn the ratio to a 4 to 1 ratio. That works fine. I'm being a little bit more on the soft side here, 2.38 to 1. So attack and release are your new best friend. Attack tells you how fast is this compressor going to start working. And as you can imagine, if your attack is too high, it's going to take too long for that gain reduction to take place, so that certain sounds, such as a snare drum, won't even be impacted by your compressor at all if that attack is too long. So for certain applications, faster instruments, let's say something punchy like a snare or a bass drum or even a hi-hat, you're going to want a very fast attack and you're going to want a shorter release. If your release is too long, your compressor is going to let out too long, and that compression is just going to stampede right over that next waveform. So you want to shorten up that release and that attack for shorter instruments. And on the flip side, you can have a longer attack and release on longer instruments such as a pad or even certain vocal applications, verbed out instruments. Make sure you eat your Wheaties and watch your YouTube videos before you compress, kids, because wrong compression settings can have a seriously poor impact on a mix, where the compression may not be working even at all, or it may be even worse, pumping, over compressing, or having negative impacts on your favorite sounds. So I hope you've enjoyed my video about compression and learned a few things along the way. Subscribe to my channel and I'll keep this rough track playing.